Good morning, folks. As folks kind of trickle in from the waiting room, we're going to just give folks a few minutes to come in, but feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know your name and your municipality or your organization. Emily, can I get a thumbs up that you can see my slides?
Yeah, I can see your slides,
Awesome.
Amy.
Thank you very much. All right, for the folks who are just joining us, we're just going to let a few more people join, but in the meantime, please feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know your name and your municipality or your organization, and then we're going to get started in about 1 minute. Okay, I think it's good to go ahead and get started. So, good morning, everybody. I'm Amy Verbosky. I'm the manager of the Healthy and Resilient Communities at DVRPC. It's so great to see so many of you joining us this morning. We're really happy to have you here at our Municipal Exchange. For those of you who are new to the Municipal Exchange, this is a quarterly forum that brings together municipal staff, elected officials, utilities, and regional partners to share ideas, learn from one another, and discuss practical solutions to common local challenges. Today's topic, of course, is supporting local water systems, funding technical assistance and partnerships. And we know that communities across our region are facing a wide range of water infrastructure challenges, from aging systems to new regulatory requirements, increasingly intense storms, and limited staff capacity. And while every community's situation is different, many of the challenges and the opportunities to address them are shared. Our goal today isn't to cover every aspect of water infrastructure. Instead, we hope that you'll leave with a better understanding of the tools and resources that are available to help communities move projects forward. And more broadly, one of the goals of the Municipal Exchange is to strengthen the connection between municipalities and DVRPC. We want local officials to know about the planning resources and technical assistance available through DVRPC and our partners, while also creating opportunities for municipalities to learn from one another. And just as importantly, these conversations help us better understand the challenges you're facing so that we can continue to be a responsive and effective regional partner. So, a few quick housekeeping items before we dive in. If you haven't already, please introduce yourself in the chat, again, with your name and municipality or organization. It looks like we have folks joining us from all across the region, and it's really nice to see who's in the room with us today. Please use the Q&A box to submit questions for our speakers. And then throughout the meeting, please feel free to use the chat to share ideas and resources, or tell us about your own experiences. We think that some of the best learning happens when municipalities can learn from one another, and we really encourage you to jump into the conversation. And just a reminder that today's session is being recorded, and we will share the recording and the presentation materials after the meeting. So with that, I'd like to take a minute to tell you a little bit about DVRPC and how today's conversation fits into our broader work. So for those of you who may be less familiar with DVRPC, we are the Delaware Valley Regional Planning Commission and serve as the federally designated metropolitan planning organization for the greater Philadelphia region. We cover a bi-state 9-county region that includes 350 municipalities, and our mission is to build consensus around a shared regional vision, develop data-driven and community-centered solutions, and help turn plans into action. A big part of that work is bringing partners together, like all of you, to collaborate on issues that matter most to our communities. And everything we do is guided by our long-range plan, which is Update Connections 2050. So, Update Connections 2050 lays out a vision for a greater Philadelphia with clean, reliable, and affordable infrastructure and utility services, that's down here, that are resilient to the effects of extreme weather. Of course, water infrastructure doesn't exist in isolation. It's closely connected to many of the other goals in the plan, from supporting healthy communities and protecting the environment to fostering a strong regional economy. So today's Municipal Exchange is one example of how we're working with municipalities and our regional partners to help advance that vision. Oh, there we go. And to the agenda. Today, we're going to begin with Emily Goldstein from DVRPC, who will set the stage by discussing some of the key challenges facing local water systems across our region. From there, we'll hear from Mary Samar with the Environmental Policy Innovation Center, who will discuss debt financing and how communities can think strategically about funding long-term infrastructure investments. Next, Ellen Kohler from the Water Center at Penn will moderate a panel discussion with municipal representatives from Millbourne, Avondale, and Branchville boroughs. They'll share their experiences working with technical assistance providers to address local water infrastructure challenges. And then we're going to hear from my colleagues Karen Slurso and Greg Kirkevich about a number of DVRPC resources and how DVRPC can help with local planning needs. Finally, we'll open the floor for our regular municipal updates, where we invite participants to share projects, events, or announcements from their communities. But before we jump into the presentations, we want to hear from all of you. So we're going to launch a quick poll asking, what is the biggest barrier to advancing water infrastructure projects in your community? And I don't know if Karen or Maggie is able to do that.
I'm looking for it. I'm sorry it's not showing up.
I got it, Karen.
Thank you.
All right. So folks should be able to see that now. We're going to just give it a minute or so to let folks respond. All right. I think we've got about a few ones still trickling in. Okay, I'm going to end the poll and share it. So overwhelmingly, funding is a problem that a lot of folks are dealing with. Not surprising. It was actually the runaway winner, and then a few other of the other topics, staff capacity, regulatory compliance, trickled in as well. And I think that you'll find many of these themes today will come up again throughout the other presentations, and we're going to revisit some of these ideas during the panel discussion and hear how other communities have addressed similar challenges. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and turn this over to Emily to set the stage for today's conversation.
Great, thanks, Amy. If folks can bear with me just while I bring my presentation up. Amy, does everything look okay on your end?
Yes, it looks great. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, fantastic. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emily Goldstein. I'm an environmental planner here at DVRPC, and I'm going to be walking us through some of the most pressing challenges that are facing our regional water system today. Water infrastructure serves a number of critical functions that are often managed through separate systems, but are, of course, interconnected. Drinking water systems protect public health by delivering safe and reliable drinking water to residents and businesses. Wastewater systems protect waterways and public health by collecting and treating sewage. And stormwater infrastructure helps manage runoff, reduce localized flooding, and protects both communities and receiving bodies of water. These systems support virtually every aspect of daily life and economic activity. When they function well, they are largely invisible, and when they begin to fail, the impacts can be immediate and costly. Across the region, utilities are managing multiple challenges simultaneously. Infrastructure is aging and requires replacement. Storms are becoming more intense. Utilities are responding to new drinking water standards and lead service line requirements, and many systems continue to face staffing shortages and limited financial resources. Each of these challenges is significant on its own, but what makes them particularly difficult is that they often occur at the same time and compete for the same limited staff capacity and funding. Many of the systems serving Greater Philadelphia today were constructed decades ago, and in some cases more than a century ago. Water mains are generally expected to last between 75 to 100 years, yet many systems are now reaching or exceeding that threshold. In Philadelphia, for example, the average water main is approximately 76 years old, and the system experiences roughly 776 water main breaks annually. The city loses an estimated 60 million gallons of treated water each day through leaks in the distribution system. While every system is different, many communities are facing similar questions about how to prioritize replacement and reinvestment. Many utilities are also preparing for a future in which weather-related disruptions become more frequent and more severe. Heavy rainfall, which we might experience today, can overwhelm drainage systems, contribute to flooding, and place additional stress on treatment facilities and collection systems. In communities served by combined sewer systems, intense storms can increase the likelihood of overflow events that impact water quality. As communities evaluate future investment, resilience increasingly means ensuring infrastructure can continue to perform under changing conditions. Utilities are also navigating an evolving regulatory landscape. Recent federal requirements include the PFAS National Primary Drinking Water Regulation, lead and copper rule improvements, resilience planning requirements under America's Water Infrastructure Act, and ongoing MS4 obligations. These requirements are intended to protect public health and the environment, but they also require significant investments in planning, monitoring, infrastructure, and administration. For many of our communities, compliance itself can become a substantial workload. When water infrastructure challenges are discussed, the conversation often focuses on funding. Funding is certainly important, but one challenge that is often overlooked is staff capacity. Many communities understand the infrastructure needs they face. They may know which projects and priorities and which funding programs they want to pursue. But what is often missing is the time, technical expertise, or staff resources needed to develop projects, prepare applications, coordinate with partners, and manage implementation. In many cases, capacity constraints can slow progress just as much as financial constraints. I think that the statistic on this slide is particularly staggering. Technical assistance is one of the primary tools available to communities to overcome these capacity constraints. Technical assistance programs provide communities with access to expertise, planning support, technical analysis, funding guidance, and project development assistance. Importantly, technical assistance is not just about helping communities find money. It is about helping community build the foundation needed to successfully advance projects from concept to implementation. Technical assistance can support communities in a variety of ways depending on their needs. Examples include asset management, infrastructure planning, lead service line inventories, funding application support, community outreach and engagement, procurement assistance, rate studies, system mappings, and project prioritization. These services help communities move from identifying a problem to developing a project that is ready to compete for funding and ultimately be implemented. This is where partnerships become particularly important. Over the last 3 years, DVRPC has partnered with the Environmental Policy Innovation Center, also known as EPIC, through initiatives like the Funding Navigator to connect communities with technical assistance providers in our regions, like the ones shown on the slide. DVRPC's role has largely been that of a place-based partner through our work with municipalities, utilities, and counties across the region. We are often able to identify communities facing significant infrastructure needs, but lacking the staff capacity or financial resources needed to move the projects forward. Working alongside EPIC, we've helped connect communities with technical assistance for projects ranging from lead service line inventories and asset management to funding applications, procurement support, and long-term infrastructure planning. Technical assistance helps communities identify needs and develops projects. The next question is often how those projects will ultimately be funded. While grant funding can be an important piece of the puzzle, grants are typically competitive, limited in availability, and rarely cover the full cost of a major infrastructure investment. As projects grow in size and complexity, communities often need to consider a broader range of financing strategies to support long-term infrastructure investment. For major capital projects, debt financing is often an essential part of the conversation. Water infrastructure is expensive, long-lived, and critical to public health. Financing allows utilities to spread the costs of major investments over the useful life of an asset rather than paying the full cost up front. For many large projects, financing is not simply an option, it's often a necessity. And again, while grant funding can certainly help, they often only cover a portion of the project's total cost. Most communities will eventually need to pair grant funding with local revenue sources and long-term financing strategies. Building resilient water systems require more than any single funding source, program, or organization can provide. It requires strong local leadership, technical expertise, planning partnerships, and sustainable financing strategies working together. Technical assistance can help communities build capacity and develop projects. Financing tools can help implement those projects, and partnerships help connect communities with the resources they need along the way. And with that, I will pass it off to my colleague Mary with EPIC, who will discuss debt financing in greater detail.
Good morning, everyone. I can have a moment to share my screen. Emily, are you seeing the screen okay?
Looks great, Mary.
Okay, wonderful. Well, good morning, everyone. I am so glad to be joining you all today. Mary Samar, Funding Navigator Manager at EPIC. And yeah, as Emily mentioned, I will be discussing the value of utilizing debt financing for water and wastewater infrastructure improvements. I'm going to specifically focus on the State Revolving Fund loan program, as well as some discussion around municipal bonds. So simply put, debt financing is the process of raising capital by borrowing money to pay for major capital projects or assets. For water utilities and municipalities, this is one of the primary ways to finance high-cost infrastructure improvements that can't feasibly be paid for with cash on hand. So when a utility issues debt, whether through a loan or through issuing a municipal bond, it agrees to repay the borrowed amount or the principal along with interest over a specified period of time. These scheduled payments are known as debt service, and interest rates may vary depending on market conditions. And debt is a highly effective tool for funding large capital projects. It is often extremely difficult to fund capital assets solely through current resources like utility rates or cash on hand. Capital projects are expensive, and for many smaller local governments and utilities, it's simply not realistic to have several $1,000,000 readily available for a major capital investment. So strategic debt financing allows essential projects to move forward while spreading the cost, as Emily mentioned, across the customers who will benefit from the improvements over time. And that being said, debt certainly must be managed responsibly. Taking on too much debt can inhibit a utility from funding its operations. And utilities should carefully manage their budgets and customer water rates, which we'll talk about a little bit to ensure they can generate sufficient revenue to make debt service payments while also maintaining reliable operations. But overall, debt finance should be viewed as a strategic investment, not something necessarily to avoid altogether, but something that does require thoughtful financial planning. And I want to briefly discuss the distinction between funding and financing. These terms are often used interchangeably, but they do have different meanings. This is building off of Emily's introduction here. So funding on one hand is referred to money that is provided, especially by an organization or a government for a particular purpose. So you can think of funding as grants, for example. Grants from a federal agency, state, donor, partner, and agency. This is money that is offered for a particular purpose and typically does not need to be repaid as long as certain eligibility requirements are met. But I do want to stick to this point around grants, right? Because certainly a utility would prefer to utilize grants over borrowing money. And while grants are valuable in keeping upfront costs low, when they're available, the challenge, again, is that grant funding is often sporadic, limited in availability, and grants are highly competitive. So for those reasons, grant funding can't necessarily be relied on as a sustainable source of capital continuously, or otherwise you are in a position where you might be waiting for a windfall to do any capital improvements, and you're likely putting off projects that really can't wait in the long term. And it's difficult to build a long-term capital improvement program on grant funding alone. Also, grants aren't necessarily free money with no ties. Many grants, especially federal grants, come with significant requirements, including compliance with federal uniform guidance, reporting obligations, and in many cases, a federal single audit if the federal grant spending threshold is exceeded, which is $1 million in a year. And then also, grant funded assets may also increase operations and maintenance costs, and those costs will still need to be accounted for in future financial planning. And financing, on the other hand, is, again, borrowed capital that is repaid over time through utility revenues. And financing is typically the best tool for large, long-lived infrastructure investments. Projects like replacing water mains, constructing storage tanks, expanding treatment plants, building new pump stations, infrastructure that may last 40 to 75 years. So financing allows costs to be spread across the customers who will benefit over the life of those assets. But the key takeaway here is certainly that these tools are complementary. In most successful utilities, they often combine the use of funding and financing. For example, a utility may finance a construction of a treatment plant while utilizing grant funding to pay for a SCADA system or an emergency generator, cybersecurity improvement, advanced metering infrastructure. So thinking strategically about funding and financing sources allows a utility to stretch limited grant dollars while maintaining affordable rates and investing in long-term reliability of their system through financing. So I want to talk a minute about different forms of debt, first focusing on the state revolving fund, and then also some discussion around municipal bonds. So the state revolving fund is a state managed loan program. It provides low interest financing for water, wastewater, and stormwater projects. This program is funded by the EPA with some state matching funds, and this allows utilities to borrow at lower interest rates than available at market. So when loans are repaid, they revolve, which continues to create a sustainable funding pool for future projects by other municipalities and utilities. So there's a drinking water state revolving fund and a clean water state revolving fund in each of the 50 states and Puerto Rico. So each state administers its own SRF program. In Pennsylvania, the SRF is administered by PennVest. And in New Jersey, it is administered by the New Jersey Water Bank, which is a partnership between New Jersey DEP and the New Jersey Infrastructure Bank. So the Clean Water SRF focuses on your wastewater system, stormwater, non-point source pollution, and green infrastructure, while Drinking Water SRF focuses on water treatment, distribution, water supply, and storage. And the pros, again, for around the state revolving fund is that the subsidies from the federal government allows for below market interest rates, meaning overall lower project costs. And repayment terms are generally more flexible than revenue bonds. Terms can be 20 years, but can be extended to 30 years based on affordability criteria that is determined by the state SRF agency. There's also opportunities, importantly so, for principal forgiveness for communities that qualify. Principal forgiveness is offered based on affordability metrics and using income statistics like median household income. Now, the cons around the SRF is that it can be administratively time-consuming. The application process is lengthy. Each state agency has their own rules, and applicants should become familiar with them before applying. Some of those requirements include Buy America, Build America, Davis-Bacon requirements. But if a utility is willing and able to navigate those additional steps and requirements, obtaining an SRF loan may be the best way to finance your water infrastructure project with low interest rate and a percentage of principal forgiveness on the loans. And municipal bonds, on the other hand, these are a type of loan where money is being borrowed from investors. So after the sale of the bond, the municipality receives the upfront capital, which is repaid over time with interest to the investors. There are general obligation bonds and revenue bonds. General obligation bonds are based on the taxing power of the municipality, whereas revenue bonds are based on the revenue coming from the utility. The pros for municipal bonds are that they are certainly less administratively burdensome, especially if a municipality has a history of general obligation bonds. But some considerations are that a municipality will need a credit rating to access a municipal bond. Interest rates are tied to the market rate, and a credit rating does make a difference in terms of how much the interest rate varies. Simply put, good credit rating, lower interest rate. And I'd like to continue on with this comparison between a municipal bond and SRF loan financing. And I thought it might be interesting to provide an illustrative cost breakdown of the difference of funding a capital project through a municipal bond versus an SRF loan. And we're going to focus specifically on Penvest SRF loan. So the assumptions in this example, and of course these are illustrative, actual terms will vary by borrower in the funding cycle. But the assumptions here are that the cost of the capital project is $5 million. The interest rate for a municipal revenue bond is 5% with a 30-year repayment term. And then on the other hand, the Penvest SRF loan, it has an interest rate of 1.5% with a 20-year term. The service area in this scenario has 1,500 service connections. So in this scenario, we have got our terms here, $5 million base capital project, interest rates, and terms. The repayment in this scenario for the municipal bond will be, after 30 years, around $9.7 million, as opposed to the total repayment amount of the Penvest loan at $5.8 million. And this certainly illustrates, right, the value of Penvest loans and SRF financing, and its ability to keep total project costs low because of the subsidies, low interest rates, flexible terms, et cetera. And so continuing the scenario here, the annual debt service for the municipal bond, and of course, keeping in mind this is over 30 years, annual debt service is $325,000 compared to $291,000 for the Penvest loan, but that is only for a 20-year loan term. And most importantly, to utilities is the impact on ratepayers. So the total monthly cost per connection in the scenario for the municipal bond is around $18, again, over 30 years, where $16 per connection for the Penvest loan over 20 years. So thought that would be interesting to review a bit of a cost breakdown and scenario, just to highlight the value and the role that SRFs can play in low-cost financing. And then I want to provide another scenario, if you will indulge me. And this is really focusing on the cost of waiting to pursue a capital improvement project. And before I do that, I want to make a note about deferred maintenance, right? So the idea of waiting and doing nothing when it comes to aging infrastructure is often not really an option, right? Because as systems age, breakdowns become more frequent, operation and maintenance costs increase, utilities end up spending more to keep outdated infrastructure running, often through costly emergency repairs instead of planned investments. So in addition to that cost around deferred maintenance, this here is a cost breakdown to illustrate the increase in total capital construction costs when waiting just 5 years to begin a capital project. So we're looking at the Penvest scenario here with the 1.5% interest rate over a 20-year loan term. And again, the base cost of the capital project in 2026 is $5 million. If waiting 5 years to begin in 2031, you're looking at an increased base cost of $5.7 million. And that's assuming a 3% annual construction inflation. So an increased base cost of over $700,000 by waiting those 5 years. And then continuing on with the scenario, again, the total repayment would have been $5.8 million in 2026, and that total repayment balloons to $6.7 million by waiting 5 years. Again, that annual debt service, which was just under 200, I'm sorry, $300,000, increases by about $35,000 a year. And most importantly, the impact to ratepayers on a monthly basis per connection increases by $2, just over $2 per month. So yeah, overall, it's the cost of delaying a capital improvement project can be significant. You're looking at a total added cost paid by ratepayers just over $1 million by waiting 5 years. So beginning sooner rather than later can help reduce impact on ratepayers, and the cost of a capital improvement project will never be as affordable as it is today. So, on that discussion around ratepayers and utility rates, it's right of value to keep rates as low as possible for customers. And just to note that utility rates should be adequate enough to cover the full cost of service, right? So this includes operations and maintenance, expenses, including fixed costs, variable costs, and also non-operating expenses like depreciation, debt service, capital outlay. Rates should also aim to generate a margin or surplus sufficient to build reserves. And understandably, there can be a hesitancy around raising rates. And in some small utilities, rates may have been kept low and static for an extended period of time, so much so that there becomes a deeply embedded sensitivity around rate increases. There also could be some political considerations around a hesitancy to raise rates during an elected official's term in office. But the issue around keeping rates low and static for an extended period of time is that it may end up creating a scenario where you might have to implement a larger rate increase at one time in the future, as opposed to incremental annual increases. But overall, keeping rates as low as possible is dependent upon seeking the best financing package available when pursuing debt financing. Again, focusing on the state revolving fund, low interest loans with favorable subsidies, and pursuing strategic debt financing will allow you to keep rates as low as possible, but also investing in long-term reliability of your system. And I can't emphasize enough here in terms of rates, the importance of being transparent and proactive in communication with ratepayers when it comes to rate increases. Customers are more likely to support rate increases when they understand why the investment is needed, how it benefits them, and how the utility is working to manage costs responsibly. And of course, if affordability is an issue, it's important to connect ratepayers to assistance programs and resources for utility assistance. And then just a note about future ratepayers here. So one of the consequences of avoiding debt and deferring capital improvements is that it does shift the cost to future ratepayers. And as I illustrated earlier, the cost of a capital improvement project, it will never be cheaper than it is right now. And it's also important to maintain trust in reliable water services. If there is a distrust that is developed, customers may turn away from utilizing municipal water, leading to decreased revenues. So I guess the question really is to ask is, can your utility afford to have your customers distrust your system? And also, can your customers afford it? So my final note here is to just highlight that if your utility is interested in pursuing a capital improvement project, either through grant funding, debt financing, and think you could use some extra assistance in the process of seeking funding and financing, we have technical assistance available. I believe after this call, you'll be left with a handout and a resource with a list of technical assistance providers. My organization is listed, as well as Ellen's organization, the Water Center at Penn. There are a variety of technical assistance providers that can support through this process of pursuing funding and financing for capital improvement projects. The assistance that we have available is to first identify funding and financing opportunities, prepare grant applications, loan applications, assistance with developing asset management plans, capital improvement plans. We've got assistance to conduct rate studies, connect utilities with engineering services, also support with that community outreach piece. and hopefully support long-term capacity for your utility. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. I think we have a few minutes for some Q&A. So um, while if folks have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A box there. And then while I will kick us off with just one question for you, Mary, if you're able to come back on camera. So you've covered a lot of ground, and you talked about the importance of financing projects before costs continue to rise, the cost of waiting. So I guess, what are some steps that communities should take to become project ready, to get ready to pursue that funding?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if possible, capital improvement planning, strategic planning, um, at the end of the day, connecting with engineering resources, looking at understanding the costs associated with a project, specifications, and those are things that technical assistance can support with. Um, Especially when going to the state revolving fund, understanding what the requirements of those programs are, being very well prepared in advance before pursuing that type of funding source. Those are all the things that utilities can do to prepare.
Great. Yeah. Um, and I guess, you know, we talked a lot about kind of why communities, understandably want to seek grants and kind of the benefits of really um, pursuing debt financing and the role that debt financing can play. Um, I guess, why do you think communities are often hesitant to use debt financing, and how can we help kind of continue to change that mindset?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's again, I think it's important to understand, right, that the grants that are out there are highly competitive. And I mean, understanding also that the state revolving fund does offer grant-like funding through
Mhm.
principal forgiveness. So I guess understanding that that is a resource and available, a option that is available is important, and kind of opening up that option as
Great.
well.
Thank you. Um, okay. Ellen noticed she'll address the question in the chat box there. So I'm not seeing any other questions coming from the audience. Mary, do you have any other closing thoughts? I think you covered a lot of ground today. So
No, thank you so much. I appreciate having the opportunity
awesome.
to share.
Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, so now we are going to move on to our panel discussion. And if I could get um, Ellen, Bill, Sharon, Joan, and Dave to join me on screen. Thank you. So we are joined today by Ellen Kohler, who is the Director of Applied Research and Policy at the Water Center at Penn. She has graciously agreed to moderate a panel discussion with our fantastic panelists, and they are on the screen as well. So we have Bill Stewart, who is the Borough Manager for Milbourne Borough in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. We're also joined by Sharon Norris, who is the Borough Administrator, and Joan McFaw, who is the Treasurer in Avondale Borough in Pennsylvania. And then we have Dave Simmons, who is here in his role as Borough Engineer with Branchville, New Jersey. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ellen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. And just quickly, a little bit about the Water Center at Penn. We are an applied research center that works with communities on the challenges facing their drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater systems and how those systems interact with the watersheds where the community is. We are part of a water technical assistance team, a real water TA team for EPA Region 3. That's led by the University of Maryland's Environmental Finance Center, and we are the leads for that work in Pennsylvania and Delaware. So that gives you a little bit of framework around why we're part of this conversation, and have been working on that project for the last 3.5 years and have about another year moving forward. And this is about getting those Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act dollars out on the ground. So what we're going to do now is we're going to have each one of our panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the project that they are trying to address, the challenge that they are trying to address, that we and what prompted you to seek outside assistance in addressing that water infrastructure challenge. And Dave, if you don't mind, we'll start with you.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for having me today. Uh, we're municipal engineers for about 12 municipalities up in Sussex County in the northern part of the state. And Branchville Borough is one of our clients for about 60 years. And basically what happened, we had two main projects. One was with our existing well, PFAS to address. And the cost to address the treatment for that was in excess of approximately $2 million. And we also had two approximately half-mile long water mains, cast iron unlined, that were causing water quality problems. And each of those was going to cost roughly about $900,000. So we were looking at a total in the neighborhood of about $4 million. And we partnered with Epic, particular Christina Patagna from that group, who was very, very helpful. And long story short, we were fortunate enough at the time to secure principal forgiveness for those projects. So that enabled those projects to go forward. And as we speak, the contractor's doing test holes as we're here on screen right now. So that's our update.
Great, thanks very much. Bill, would you like to go next, please?
Hi, good morning. My name is William Stewart. I'm the part-time borough manager for Millbourne Borough. Our project with Epic, and just to give some context of Millbourne Borough, of the 49 municipalities in all of Delaware County, we ranked 49th in size. So we're very, very small, but sometimes small means manageable. And so we've not undertaken a sanitary sewer study in some years. So our project that we partnered with Epic was to start off and do some GIS mapping of our system, followed by CCTV to provide not only a strategy for anything that needed to be cleaned, but also to get a good condition assessment of the project. Followed by some flow metering so we could see where we had high INIs. And all of that work is now complete. So the data collection's complete, and we are now into the next phase, which is we working directly with Mary, and she will attest it's probably the most important phase, which is to do something. So we are now in the process of, I've got a meeting next week with McCumbee Engineering, and we will do actually some decision making in regards to what repairs need immediate action, and then start looking at some long-term, what can wait 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and so on. And then lastly would be the funding aspects, which would be whether we go for funding, whether we look for opportunities for grants, or most ideally looking for a combination of both to address the concerns that we have here in Millbourne Borough.
Great, thanks very much for that background. Sharon and Joan, would you like to go next?
Sure. So I'm Sharon, the borough administrator, and Joan is the borough treasurer, and we're the only two employees. And we're a small community with very limited staff and resources, and we didn't know always where to turn for specialized technical assistance. But fortunately, we were already working with Ellen, who she introduced us to additional resources and opportunities that we didn't even know existed. And then before we worked with Ellen, we knew we needed help addressing our infrastructure challenges. We didn't know where to start. We didn't know who to ask. And then having someone who understood the needs of this very small and poor municipality, she could connect us with the right people, and that made all the difference and opened doors to expertise and support that we couldn't have found on our own. And so that led us to the lead and copper rule inventory, which was what really made us realize that we couldn't do it alone. And then the scope was overwhelming, and we knew it was a very important requirement. It was becoming a deficiency on our DEP inspections at our water plant, but we didn't have the expertise, the time, or the resources to figure out where to begin. And that's where Ellen came in, and she connected us with Christina, and the whole project fell into place. And after many, many meetings where Ellen and Christina would just focus us and hold our hands and make sure that all the information that we needed was printed in both English and Spanish, and that town halls were organized and held, we were able to submit our lead and copper inventory and no more deficiencies on our DEP inspections. So that was a win.
Great. Thank you all for giving us a little bit of background about the project that we're talking about today. And I really appreciate that we have different kinds of projects here, right? We've got a couple of drinking water projects, also a wastewater project, and just very representative of the multiple challenges that our communities are facing, right? I think the other thing I want to point out is that you've all mentioned technical assistance, but you've also, and I know this is true for you guys at Avondale, so I'm willing to say this for you, but it also meant working with your existing engineers, right? This technical assistance that we're providing to communities, I just want to be really clear, is not about replacing your existing engineer. It's about working with your existing engineer and building capacity and addressing a particular challenge. So, that sometimes I think there are some municipalities that are a little concerned about what that relationship might be, but that's not what the technical assistance that we work with communities does in any way, shape, or form. So I just want to go back to Branchville for a second here, Bill, you were talking about the various different challenges that you were looking at, and I'm just curious how you went about figuring out which ones, sorry, this is David, how you were figuring out which projects to prioritize. How did you do that planning? What were the metrics that you were looking at to figure out that prioritization?
Well, basically, just to give a little more depth to the borough of Branchville, as Bill pointed out, it's a small municipality, about 1 square mile, with a population of just under 900 people. And basically, we have 2 wells and a 1 million-gallon storage tank and the distribution system. The reality of it is, our well number 1, for discussion purposes, produced about 200 gallons per minute. Well number 2, a backup well, about 100 gallons per minute. And when the DEP in New Jersey required PFAS testing, that's when we found that well number 1 significantly exceeded the maximum contaminant levels. So when you've only got 2 wells, you've got to make sure you've got them both online. So that prioritized us right away. Luckily, we had well number 2. However, when one produces 200 gallons per minute and one 100 gallons per minute, we basically got the same demand of around 75,000 gallons per day. But in the meantime, we've only got half the supply capacity. So we've been working diligently to get the treatment in line and constructed for well number 1 so that can get back online, because well number 2 was only intended to be an emergency backup. With regards to the 2 water main projects, as the ladies from Avondale pointed out, we also have our lead service line inventory to do. And as the borough has done some of their municipal roads over the years, one of the things they've done is do a two-year phase type of situation. The first year, they go in and replace an old cast iron line with new ductile iron, minimum 8-inch, and they produce new service lines from the corporation stop over to and including the curb stop and the curb box with a minimum of 3/4-inch type K copper, so that at least for the borough's portion of the service line, whenever they did a street, that was taken care of. Then the following year, after any miscellaneous settlement, they redo the street and finish that particular street up. The 2 streets that we got funding for and are under construction right now are both county roads. And the problem we had with those are, number 1, they're very highly trafficked roads. So traffic control is an issue. Number 2, with respect to the county requirements, they want everything after it's excavated out to be backfilled completely with dense graded aggregate, and then the lane or lanes milled and repaved, and all that adds a significant amount of cost to that water main project. So as a result of that, those 2 projects were basically put on hold for many, many years. What we found, though, is that with the lead service line inventory, we had to go in there and find out, well, do we have galvanized? Do we have lead service lines? We don't think we do, but I'm a firm believer until you've got your hand on it, you don't know for sure. The other thing we found from repairing a service line leak, we may not have a lead or galvanized service line, but we had a lead gooseneck. So we've got a situation where the only way you're going to know that for sure is to excavate down and see it. So those 2 streets, because of what I just explained, prioritized how we were going after the water main replacement, which was causing us a water quality problem, but also for the lead service line inventory, and again, supply for the well. That's what drove how we chose them.
Thanks so much. Bill or Sharon and Joan, do you want to address, how these projects came sort of to the top of the list for you and your communities?
Why, yes. We have many water infrastructure issues in our community. And so we knew we didn't have the ability to dig anything up. We just couldn't afford it. So the only way to complete the lead and copper inventory, we felt, was to get into the houses that we could. And we were able to use our garage youth center as the people who were actually going to be out in the field, because most of them were bilingual and familiar with our community members, and we felt that we would have the biggest participation number if we could get those people to do it for us. And they were agreeable, and we sent them out with test kits, and they were able to determine what that pipe was made of. And because the borough doesn't have accurate mapping, we thought, oh, this can have a dual purpose. We can chart where the water pipe comes into the house, so that we at least would have some idea when we're out looking for curb stops, where could we begin? At least we'd have a side of a house and not just the full yard. Yeah, and so I think we did find that there were some of those lead goosenecks, but no plan is in place to replace them. We just know that we have to eventually. We did receive a curb stop grant where we hope to be able to replace the service line and then maybe replace that gooseneck at that time.
Yeah.
But
I think we're seeing that across lots of communities, right? They're trying to build in the lead service line replacement, as you described, David, to some of the other work that they're already planning to do, that they need to do with respect to aging infrastructure. And I do think that, for both communities, that rule was part of the driver, right? So that's that regulatory piece is sort of part of what's both the PFAS regulation in your situation, David, and the lead service line. But Bill, I'm sort of curious with respect to the sanitary sewer, was there some reason, something that, happened in the community, or was this just one of those things that, boy, you've been meaning to get to, and here came the water TA that was able to help you out?
Has to give some thanks to our friends from PICO. They were undertaking a gas main renewal project throughout the entire community. And as the engineering crew was out, kind of providing some cursory oversight of the excavation and installation of the new gas mains and the new gas services associated with it. Every time we crossed a sanitary sewer, whether it was a main or a lateral, it was the old clay pipe. And if anybody is familiar with the old clay pipe, the minute that you open it up, expose it to the atmosphere and look at it, it'll break. So there was a lot of repair work that needed to be done as PICO was undertaking their gas main. And that was what prompted the discussions with our engineering crew that said, we're basically looking at a ticking time bomb here, and we need to do something sooner rather than later. And that was kind of the marriage that we made with Epic and Funding Navigator, was to say, okay, let's undertake a full study of the community and then start making some decisions on how we're going to do maintenance and rehabilitation and replacement to keep the infrastructure in a state of good repair.
Thanks. Yeah, it is amazing what you can find when you do a little digging, right? I think Avondale had a similar situation, not intending to find a problem and found a problem, right? But we're working in communities where this infrastructure has been built out for a long time, and what's underground is a variety of different kinds of utilities, right? And so this is not going to be a common situation for a lot of the communities in the Delaware Valley. I think that, oh, sorry, Emily, I'm assuming that's just a question for folks in the chat. Let's turn to financing. I'm just a little curious about whether you can talk about, and David, if you want to address this first, that would be great. But can you talk about how financing, so looking, I believe some of the work that you had done is going to be financed or was financed through the New Jersey SRF program through the Water Bank. Can you talk a little bit about, what made that possible, and what advice you'd give communities in exploring similar opportunities?
Sure. Um, the borough at first was a little hesitant to get involved with that type of financing because, as you pointed out in one of your earlier slides, it does involve a lot of administrative work. And it's administrative work that for a municipality like Branchville, they had never gone through it. There was some hesitation involved. But two things happened. Number one, again, the Epic folks, in particular Christina Patagna, got involved and had been down this road many times and was there to guide and shepherd the borough through that process. And she knew just what was going to happen and what we were going to have to prepare. And she guided us along those ways. And it turned out that at the time we made the application, the borough was eligible for the principal forgiveness. And one of the things that Christina had pointed out, when you're talking millions of dollars and you're talking a relatively small customer base, it could have a big impact. To put it in perspective, probably about 10 years ago, the borough, after many decades, finally got sanitary sewer installed in the borough. So that raised their rates quite a bit, probably in the neighborhood of about $1,600 a year per customer. So they had already taken on a big cash nut to crack with that. So they were really hesitant about adding more debt service on and increasing the rates even more. So when they realized that they were allowed to have that principal forgiveness, that spurred it on to go through the program. Now, the one thing I can say is that Christina was instrumental in organizing several Zoom or Teams meetings with the borough officials and DEP officials and the Epic folks, from the standpoint that along the way we were guided and got input from everyone, because there were some engineering studies that had to be done that in addition we received funding for as reimbursement for the borough, which was very helpful in order to satisfy the criteria for the funding. So I guess the biggest thing I would say is with the Epic folks, they knew what the process was. They shepherded us through. They had contacts that they had worked with the DEP and the iBank that they could call and say, what else can Branchville do to expand upon this project and get the funding without being disappointed in the end, if you will. And she did a great job on that. And that's what really carried the ball for Branchville.
And Bill, I'm just a little curious about what how you're positioning the borough with respect to future planning and funding opportunities, given, the work that you've now had completed.
Yeah, we're just entering into that stage of where we're engaging with different funding entities. Fortunately for Millbourne Borough, we have been very proactive with making sure that we're collecting the appropriate sewer fees and making sure that those fees have dollars available for not only maintenance of the existing infrastructure, but also capital improvements. So we are pushing very close to a nest egg of about $1 million that has been set aside for sewer. From an educational standpoint, sometimes sitting in the manager's role, you've got to provide that education to the counselors coming in. They say they see $1 million and they want to spend it on all kinds of different projects, and you have to explain, this is for sewer. I am legally obligated to spend this money on sewer. This is a fee that we've collected from our residents, who in turn are the customers and stakeholders. They're users of the system. It's their money that we collected to make sure the system is in a state of good repair. So, certainly we've got some skin in the game, so to speak, in the fact that we do have a little bit of a nest egg. But as when I have a meeting next week, I can guarantee that the initial spend for immediate needs is going to be much higher than what our current nest egg is.
Yeah, that's Mary had an interesting scenario that she built out there, with a $5 million project, which I think for a lot of your communities would be a substantial project, right? I mean, given, David, you're talking, I believe you said there are 900 customers in the community in Branchville. Did I get that right? And
900 population, about
No.
400 users.
About 100 users.
400.
400. Okay, sorry. And
That's
I know
okay.
Sharon and Joan, you have about 350 customers, right? Yeah. And Bill, how many customers you guys have?
We're in the neighborhood of be about 275.
Oh, okay. So we're talking really small, right? And so these challenges are really, you guys are some of the most challenged communities in terms of figuring out this funding piece, because spreading any kind of debt financing off across the small number of customers makes it a little more challenging. So it's really important to understand how that's going to impact. And Bill, there's several layers of communications here, right? You have to really have that strong communication piece with the decision makers. So, in your community, Bill, is that a set of, it's the borough managers that are managing the system, right? It's not an authority structure, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Is
Okay.
that we own the infrastructure.
Right. Yep.
We pay mostly it is the city of Philadelphia for the treatment
Yep.
of the gray water once we get it to
Yep.
their pump station. We do divert some into the Delcora system. However, it is Millbourne Borough that
Right.
owns the sewer system in its
Yeah.
entirety through the community.
Okay. And for Branchville, is it the same thing? It's elected officials who are making those decisions about projects that are going to go forward and any rate structure decisions. Is that right, David?
That's correct.
Yeah. And Sharon and Joan, same thing for you guys?
I'm joking.
Okay, I'll talk. We've been managing barely with by securing some grant funds, and we've been limited with that because we only look for funds that don't require a match, because that would require additional funding on our part, which is in short supply right now. So we were able to secure some funding to cover the grants that are reimbursement grants. We had to do all the work before we get the money, so yeah, that was a difficult problem too. And I did not go through the state revolving fund, which I wish I did, and I will in the future. But a local bank was very easy to work with, and they provided some funding for a short 5-year loan that we were able to handle and get some of this work done. But part of the problem too is convincing some of our council members that water should be done before roads. So we're working on that.
Yeah.
We do have a grant to do some wood pipe replacement in one section of the borough before they pave the road. That grant was for both, so that's taken care of. But it's a long process, and I would love to have $1 million nest egg sitting there for sewer or water, but right now that's a wish.
Yeah, I saw your eyes when Bill was talking about that. But I do think this is a really important point, right? Like, you have to be communicating with your elected officials about the importance of this water infrastructure and the value of those investments. And yet we know, as Emily pointed out, all this infrastructure is underground. People turn the faucet, the water comes out, they flush the toilet, it flushes. Everything's working, it's all fine. What do we need to pay for, right? Whereas the roads, they see the potholes, they see the aging infrastructure, they feel it in their cars. And that's what they go and, complain about in terms of the, public meetings that are happening. And it's very rare when I'm going to guess that it's very rare for you guys that people come to your public meetings and complain about the water infrastructure. unless it's flooding, and that's stormwater. It's not the drinking water or wastewater system. Am I right? Is that, did you have people coming to your elected officials and saying, hey, we need to take care of this?
We had on the streets that were replacing the water mains,
Yeah.
people come to the meeting with bottles of water that showed it was tainted in color.
So
That
interesting.
grabbed their attention.
Okay. Wow, that's really interesting to hear. Yeah, people don't like their water to have a different color, do
No,
they?
they do not.
That's
No, they do
very
not.
true. Very true. Okay. All right. Just one other thing I wanted. So we talked a little bit about engaging with your elected officials, but then there's also, communicating with the public. Obviously, David, in your situation, the public was very engaged. But you were also dealing with a PFAS challenge, and Joan and Sharon, you were dealing with lead service line. These are public health issues, right? And so communicating about them can be pretty challenging. And I'm just sort of curious, frankly, and Bill, wastewater is a public health issue too. So I'm wondering, what the community engagement piece looked like for you guys. Joan and Sharon, I know you engaged with the garage, and that as a public, as a community-based organization, they were able to go out and actually interact with people directly in their homes. So I'm just wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about community engagement. Joan and Sharon, maybe you want to chat a little bit more about that and the value that you saw in that community engagement in terms of the project.
Well, the fact that our community is very much Spanish speaker, very many Spanish speakers, and Sharon and I don't speak Spanish, so that was part of a problem. And so we wanted to be able to reach out to everyone and do it in a way that we could explain to them no matter what language. And so the garage was fantastic because many of their people that come in and use the facility are bilingual. And we got a terrific young man, Augustine, who headed it at the garage for us and got everybody involved. And we educated him on what they would need to do and go and see if they were inspecting someone's house. And then he taught everybody at the garage. So when they went out and did their visits, that it was beneficial that we got information from them. So it really worked out well for us to have that added support here, because I think it would have been a very big problem, and I don't think we would have been as successful as we were without that. So you really need the community's help.
And we had examples of what the pipes would look like, what their pipes probably look like, what a new pipe would look like, what a lead pipe would look like. And we didn't have as much involvement as we would have liked at our town hall meetings and with our newsletter that we sent out and with the door hangers, but we had some, and the people that did come were interested and said they'd talk to other people. And I think the word was spread really from a small group of people to a much larger group of people.
Great. And Bill, it sounds like you may have had to have some communications about, what was going on with the wastewater system. Do you want to talk a little bit about what why it was important to include residents and what you learned from that outreach approach?
And when I have an engagement with a resident, it's I think an eye-opening experience when they realize that they are the user, they are the stakeholder. When we pass along a fee for sewer, a lot of times these fees, and every year the fee gets a little bit higher, they're paralleling what they're paying in local real estate taxes in some cases for the conveyance of gray water. And I'll kind of piggyback on your discussion you had a few seconds ago, Ellen, is that when you wake up in the morning, you flush the toilet, when you hear the whoosh, you're going downstairs, you're taking your cup of coffee, and you didn't think about it because you don't see it. But when you hear the gurgle, gurgle, bubble, bubble, that just throws your complete day off. And, the fact that we had numerous residents that were out of service while Pico was making repairs to their lateral during the installation of the gas main. We've also had a very big uptick in the amount of packages, sewer backups that we require us to bring somebody in to jet and clean the lines to clear the backup. There's a lot of debris, rags, grease in our system. So there's a very good number of residents that have gotten the wake up call over the last, say, 6 to 12 months, and the fact that when you do have a sanitary sewer issue, it's something that you need to keep in mind. Everybody wants to make sure they turn the lights off and put the air conditioner on, some type of energy efficient setting to reduce the electric bill. And it's almost like that same type of education to realize that even though you can't say it, it is costing you a significant amount of money for what you do put down your drains.
Yeah, absolutely true. And David, I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about community engagement, either around the PFAS project or the water main projects that you'd like to share.
I think the biggest one was the PFAS project, because DEP required us to hand out public notices. And with a small municipality like Branchville, the DPW staff actually went door to door and handed them out by hand. And what the borough decided to do was schedule a portion of a public meeting where everyone could come and answer or ask questions. And they asked me to come, and I basically gave them an update on what's going on and what the borough's doing about it. And I think that helped a lot from the standpoint. It wasn't just, all right, we've got a problem and people aren't doing anything about it and it's going to be with us forever. But we also tried to explain to them, this is not going to take care of itself in a week or 2 weeks or a month or whatever. It's a multi-year project. We're working on it. And one of the reasons we're working on it parallel is with the financing so that it's more affordable to you, the users. So I think a lot of people, when they thought about it and realized that their elected officials were working on the project and trying to make it as cost effective as we could, I think that helped calm down the public sentiment quite a bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. I think that the community engagement piece, I don't think a lot of our water system managers or system operators, they don't get training for that, right? They don't get training for the community engagement piece, but it actually, investing in that, whether it's, doing it yourself or partnering with somebody else, as Avondale did, partnering with the garage, to really do that pays dividends, right, in the long run. And if nothing else, it gives folks the opportunity to come and listen and get some, feel a little bit more reassured about what's going on. Or, and so Joan and Sharon, even in your case with the town hall meeting, you provided them multiple different avenues of getting information. And I think that those kinds of things are really, I think that's part of what we're learning in terms of the value of that community engagement piece, that it does bear dividends down the road. Right. It's worth that investment. And if there are partnerships involved, if that's part of what some of the TA that we can help you guys with, we're happy to do that. So before we turn to questions from folks in the, through the chat and whatnot, I'm just wondering if we can sort of wrap up with a question around, question or two around what advice you would give others who are thinking about pursuing technical assistance, but aren't really sure where to start. And I'm going to let one of you decide who'd like to take that on first.
I think we both would agree. Start with Ellen Kohler and then immediately hook up with Christina. And then we just couldn't have done it without the weekly meetings, the different ideas, the helping us keep on track. We're a small municipality. I mean, we want to focus on this, but there were many other activities going on that required just as much attention. So the fact that you could just guide us along, and some of your staff were able to get historical pipe information from county records for us, which helped us answer questions based on historical information.
And where to start when we were looking for
Right,
the
right.
pipes.
And then just you engaged everybody. We had our plant operator come in and talk with us, and in the end, he ended up encouraging the students to maybe have a career in plant, sewer, and water, because as we saw on the slide in the beginning, that numbers are dwindling and we're going to be in a big pickle in 10 years.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was definitely a side benefit of engaging with the garage and having those students realize the value of water infrastructure. I very much appreciated that piece. But I think really what you're saying is give water technical assistance a try, right? Like, go ahead and give it a try. Bill or Dave, who wants to go next?
I'll go.
I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Bill.
I jumped in. I think the biggest is that, you know, it's your collect, analyze, and act. When I came in and I like to do a lot of grant writing and chasing, you know, monies for the municipalities that I work in. And that was the one thing when I did my interview in Melbourne a year and 3 or 4 months ago was that, you know, you've got to have, you know, the most successful grant opportunities are the ones that you have a good foundation for. And that is kind of what I liked the most about going through the Funding Navigator program is that, you know, a lot of municipalities will do a plan. You know, I'm going to do a, you know, comprehensive plan, or I'm going to do a park study. And, you know, and unfortunately, those plans and studies should sit on a shelf and they collect dust. And, you know, with this program, is that, you know, you're able to collect your data. You're able to analyze the data you've collected. However, you have a responsibility to act and see the project through, you know, with the funding piece. And I think that was the most important thing for me is that it was a one-stop shop. And I'm very much looking forward to going to the next two stages, which we are in the analyze the data stage, followed by the put us in front of the funder stage. And you know, and that to me, you know, when we say you know that you can't see the infrastructure, you can't by being able to complete the process, that goes a long way, not just with the council body, you know, but also with the stakeholders, the customers that you serve, the residents that live in your municipality.
Yeah.
You know, I just like to dovetail what the ladies from Avondale came up with. I thought it was very productive when we would, with Christina's help, schedule bi-weekly Zoom meetings and have everybody involved, as Bill pointed out, all the stakeholders, everyone from the DPW department, which are 3 people here in Branchville. They do the roads and the sewer and the water. And also she would invite other people from the iBank or what have you, or DEP when questions came up. So it kept everybody focused.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that in everybody else's rest of their day, they've got 1,000,001 things to do. And it's easy to put something to the side, but you really have to keep on this and keep it going. And at the end of each one of those Zoom meetings, she'd come up with a set of minutes and also some action items for everybody to get done by the next meeting. So it kept everybody on track. Sometimes things slipped because other priorities came up, but at least it kept the process moving forward. And she was a great quarterback that way.
Great. Thanks you guys very much. We did have one question in the chat about, you know, about privatization, you know, and, you know, with how we are placed in protecting our water resources and our delivery systems in terms of privatization and corporate purchasing. Now, I know all of you are small municipalities, and we live in a part of the country where we do have several private water purveyors. I live in a community where my water is provided by Aqua. I'm going to guess, Bill, that's the same for you guys in Melbourne. So I'm just curious if you guys want to comment on privatization and whether it's a topic your community is talking about, and whether you're talking about what to do if your community is not thrilled about the idea of privatization, what you're thinking about doing in terms of combating that challenge.
I think years ago, in another system, that question came up, and what the municipality did there that we were involved in, they actually had a study done to see what were the rates going to be for
Yep.
the next 20 years, whatever, prorated out under privatization versus what were the rates going to be with the users funding the whole system entirely through their rate structure to see if there was a substantial difference. And because that municipality, as they say, ran a lean, mean machine as far as the operation of the facility, privatization didn't work for them.
Yeah.
I should say it didn't help them that much.
Right.
So they preferred to stay in control because they and their municipality have some redevelopment projects planned, and they wanted to make sure they were in control of the infrastructure, being the sewer and the water, so that they could help dictate. Without that, they weren't going to get some of those redevelopment projects. So they wanted to have a bit of, I guess you call it home rule.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's probably the most important thing to think about in terms of the impacts of privatization. So we are at time. We need to move to our the next phase of this webinar. But I do want to just point out that the water technical assistance that we've been talking about today is free, right? There are other water technical assistance providers in addition to Epic and the Water Center. So there are multiple avenues for getting this kind of support for your community. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Karen from DVRPC. Thank you all very much for being our panelists today. It was really wonderful to chat with you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for hosting.
Thank you, Alan. And once again, thank you to our panelists and speakers today for joining us. With the remaining time we have left, we're going to turn it back to focus a little bit on DVRPC's resources for our municipalities. And at this time, I'm going to invite my colleague, Greg Krikevich, to join the conversation to talk specifically about some municipal support that we do provide at the Commission. So, Greg?
Yeah, thanks, Karen. Just going to take a couple of minutes, a lot of great conversation about water infrastructure in particular, but we wanted to make sure everybody was aware and remind everybody of the different ways that DVRPC is available to support municipalities and communities with your other local planning needs more generally. There's three flavors of help that's available through DVRPC that I wanted to highlight over just a couple of minutes. The first, and you may have seen this during a previous Municipal Exchange meeting, but we've set up something called the Municipal Help Desk. So in our portfolio, we do a whole bunch of different things, a lot of traffic analysis, traffic counts, environmental planning work, zoning review and zoning ordinance development work, et cetera. And we want to make more of that work more approachable and available to communities to support their needs. So this tool is available at any time. It's a very simple web form. It's available at dvrpc.org/municipal help desk. If you give us a sense of what you think you need help with, we will connect you with the DVRPC staff or the DVRPC programs that are working in that space and see if we can provide quick help if you need us to help, connect you with the right person at PennDOT or, maybe help you with a traffic count or something like that. Or if it seems like you have a bigger need that's going to require more focused attention, we can help you figure out how to get a study or other development support underway. So that's our Municipal Help Desk. Again, that's dvrpc.org/municipal help desk. We have our TCDI program that I'm sure all of you are familiar with, but just as a reminder there, those are new program rounds every January. So the next round is going to be a New Jersey call for projects in this coming January 2027. We have made the program a bit larger for the most recent Pennsylvania round and then for this subsequent New Jersey round as well, and increased the capacity of the scale of the projects that can be conducted as well. TCDI is for clearly defined study needs. So you have a particular planning study or planning need in mind with a pretty clearly defined or definable scope. And TCDI is available. It's a very competitive program, but it's available to support those needs generally with consultant support if your project is collected. And then finally, our work program. So we have a new one of these every fiscal year. This is our Unified Planning Work Program. This is about 300 pages. I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading the whole thing, but it's basically DVRPC's annual portfolio of all the planning work that we conduct and all the planning work that we fund using the funds that are available to us. We have a call for projects every summer, so that's going to be getting underway shortly. Call usually goes out in August, and then we ask our board member governments to submit study requests by the middle of September or so. This is also for clearly defined study needs. But this is for work that might be conducted by DVRPC staff, might be conducted by consultants. But the important difference from TCDI and even from the help desk is that requests need to come through one of our board member governments, so counties, transit agencies, state DOTs. But this is a resource that's available to you. So if you think you have a local planning need that would benefit from some form of DVRPC help, I would encourage you to connect with your county planning commission or planning department, or connect with DVRPC, and we'll get you to the right folks to, if it's something that the county would also prioritize, to ask them to consider making that one of their requests for DVRPC as part of our work program solicitation this summer and into the fall. So 3 types of DVRPC help with local planning needs, and that's all I have, and I'm also happy to answer any questions about any of these.
Great. Thank you, Greg. I appreciate that. And then, building off of the DVRPC planning work program, I do just want to share a couple of recent publications that came out of last year's program. The first is our municipal implementation tool, number 37, which addresses data centers, which really serves as a primer for understanding what they are and what they are not, and how municipalities can move forward with this recent trend. Another publication that was just published, we have our Building Resilience Together, which is an assessment of needs and next steps for the region. And then lastly, I do want to share that on Monday, July 27th, DVRPC will be launching our new website. This is very exciting for those of us who have worked at the commission for a long time. And that navigation to all of our municipal support and help will be even easier. So please keep an eye out for that. We're at the point in the meeting where I also want to invite those of you who are with us to share any updates that you may have in your municipality about something that's going on, whether it's a new program, initiative, experience, but what we've talked about today. I'd love to open the floor up to anyone. Anyone brave enough to share? Let's see. Okay, maybe next time. But with that said, I just want to thank everybody again for joining us this morning to talk about this important topic. Our next municipal exchange will be held in October of this coming year. Emails will be sent early fall. And lastly, we please invite you to take the survey that is going to pop up on your screen as soon as today's meeting is over. So thank you all once again for your time. Thank again, and I want to just thank again our speakers and panelists and all the staff at DVRPC who put their time and effort into making today a great success. Have a wonderful day, everyone.